Okay, well, I didn't really know what to title this talk. I use my computer as much as I use my radio, and there's a lot of programs, websites, different things that I do. So today I'll kind of go through this list in a lot more detail. There are podcasts, YouTube. There's some useful information that like this last weekend, Bob noted that he talked to a lot of people and he knew their grid square. Well, I'll show you a link to the website so you can get your grid square all the way to the, there's a 4-digit and a 6-digit one. You can get the 6-digit one. How to check propagation, web SDR, DX clusters, rig control, logging. I'm just a picture of my open spot, but for those of you that are going to do DMR. And then one of the things that I've started to enjoy a lot is CW, and I'm just going to have some links about that just in case you're interested. So in terms of the podcasts, I listen to all of these. My favorite by far and away is QSO Today. Are any of you podcast listeners? Got 1, 2, 3. It's a podcast. You can download the apps on your phone. If you have an iPhone, it comes native on your iPhone. And you can go in and search by name, and then it'll come up, and you can either go to the episode that you want to play, or you can subscribe. Many of these have weekly broadcasts, and your podcaster will automatically load them up and put them in a queue. And then in my case, whenever I get in my car, I turn on and listen to the podcast. Now, QSO Today is wonderful because it's an interview. The interviewer is a guy named Eric Guth in Israel, 4Z1UG. And Eric interviews people that are important in the world of ham radio. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. There's the ARRL audio news, which we sometimes hear. Some of the clubs will play the audio news for the week as part of their weekly net. The Doctor is In is a great intensive discussion about some limited aspect of technology in the ham radio community. So they'll talk about log periodic antennas, or they'll talk about SWR or whatever. But that's a weekly thing that the ARRL puts out. Ham Radio Workbench is more for the people that like to build. They're on the high-tech side of it. Solder Smoke is another builder's blog. It's kind of a folksy kind of deal. One of the guys that came up with the name is a guy named Bill Mira, and Bill is in the Foreign Service, and he wrote a book about solder smoke, adventures in global whatever, and it describes how he went through his Foreign Service and how radio played a role in what he did in his stations. And so he was stationed, I believe, in the Canary Islands and in Italy and in England. And so very, very interesting. He's not a technical person by training, but he's learned how radios work, how to build a radio, how oscillators work. When he gets stumped by something, in his book he describes the process he goes through to figure out why the capacitor does what it does in the radio. It's fascinating stuff. But Bill Mira brought, his podcast had 3 lives, if you will, lives. First, he had a partner, and then that partner got killed in the car. And then he did solo, and now he's got a new partner, a guy named Pete Giuliano. And Pete is a builder of radios. And so last year was the year, 2008 was the year of the transceiver. And this guy scratch builds transceivers. And they talk about it in kind of a colloquial way during the podcast. And Pete Giuliano has a website that's linked on they have a blog and a website. And it's well worth going to visit and see what they do. He used to be into the old analog, build an oscillator and make a radio. But now Pete does it with the SI 5351, so there's no frequency drift in your rig when you do it. And he builds, he started off with 16:2 LED displays, and now he's building full color displays. And it's just marvelous the work this guy does. Ham Radio 360 is a podcast that no longer is in production. But if you want to learn about the hobby, he interviewed a lot of people who are doing interesting things in the hobby, from satellite to packet radio to whatever. And it's good archival information there for the newer people in particular. FM is, I would call, kind of a mediocre podcast aimed at CW. But he's interviewed a lot of interesting people, definitely worth listening to. And for those of you that are into CW, Quote of the Day is a podcast you can subscribe to, and then every single day they put a quote of the day out in CW. And you can subscribe at 8, 12, 15, 18, 20, 25, 30, and 35 words a minute. So it's a good way if you're feeling like you're getting a little rusty on your code. You can just kind of, the first thing in the morning when you get in your car, you can listen to about a 5-minute quote of the day. So, with respect to QSO Today, it's a little unintuitive, but if you go to their website, you'll pull up this link. I'll have the links to the slides. I'll try and get Chip to load up on the website, so you don't have to, try and keep track of it all. But he's had over 200 of these episodes. It's an hour. Every single week he releases an episode on a Saturday. And he's interviewed all kinds of people. Wayne Burdick, who's one of the founders of Elecraft. You want to find out why Elecraft radios work the way they do? He describes it. He also describes why a lot of people have the wrong impression about what's important in a rig for their home stations. And he'll explain to you why Elecraft is superior at blocking other signals, so it's really great in a high RF environment. Now in my case, I don't have a high RF environment, so it's not that important. Glenn Papil is, he's the guy that's the Arduino specialist, has written 2 books for the ARRL. A really interesting guy.
Still have the pocket fisherman?
Excuse me?
Does he still have the pocket fisherman?
Steve, our own Mountain Goats up there, and you'll see that Bob's up here too, and they were both on the broadcast. Bill Mara, Pete Giuliano there at Slaughter Smoke. Bob Heil, that was a fascinating thing. He got his start as a ham radio guy, and then he was volunteering time at a local auditorium where they had people playing music. And the guy that ran the thing called him up one day and said, I ordered all this new equipment, you want all the old equipment, you can have it, just haul it away. So he filled a semi full of all this old equipment and stuck it in a warehouse someplace. And then a few months later, that guy called him back and said, you still have all that stuff, we need it. And he said, yeah. He says, can you run it? He said, yeah. And so he ended up setting up and running the sound system. And I can't remember if it was The Who or the Grateful Dead.
The Who.
The Who. And then he did their productions for years. And he used his ham radio expertise to develop a studio monitor by knowing that if you sent back the audio out of phase, it'd cancel it out. Fascinating stuff. Peter Parker is a guy that builds out of junk that he finds in a junkyard down in Australia. Art Bell, he ran the blowtorch that was sort of an AM radio station. Guy had an antenna farm to die for. Ashraf Farhan, we had a presentation on the BIT X40. This guy lives in India and created 2 of the most popular kind of quick assemble kits that you can get for transceivers. Hans Summer, QRP Labs, a lot of these guys, Rob Brownstein, CWA, Rob Sherwood, who's a Denver guy, who evaluates rigs, all kind of pretty fascinating people. So, but that's just a sampling of the over 200 episodes in QSO Today.
And Rex Harper's the one that has the Rockmont radios that we all bought.
Right.
Built.
Right. Now, shifting gears a little bit to YouTube. Dave Kassler is an excellent source of information for ham radio guys. He has 4 primary channels, if you will, on YouTube. One for the technicians class, one for the general class, one for the extra class. And on the extra class, I think he had over 40 videos. I watched every one of them before I tested for my extra. He also has an Ask Dave series. There's 134 episodes, and everything from how much does it cost to set up your first station to, how does this hex beam work, to what about DMR or how about FT8. So highly recommended, very easy to get to and very accessible. That's not good.
Office 360.
Yeah, exactly. So, let's see.
You can poke the screen,
Pardon?
touch screen.
Well, it's not
Oh,
doing it.
It's a Microsoft product.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see.
that's right.
Yeah.
Greg, if you hit the Windows button and the P, it will bring up your projector options.
too.
There you go.
Okay. All right, that's another Dave Kastler slide. So, other YouTube channels: Ham Radio 2.0, K7AGE, and for those of you that are interested in space weather, Tamitha really puts on quite a show. It's well worth your while. So, in terms of other places I go for useful information, QRZ. Do I have a lot of QRZ subscribers in here? It'll allow you to go in and find out about the people you're talking to on the air. There's a QTH locator, Maidenhead grid squares, satellite information, logbook of the world we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Azimuth maps, which are pretty interesting to me, and then where you would go to get your magnetic adjustment. QRZ has a complete database of all the call signs, biographical information, all kinds of information. They also have forums and a marketplace for selling gear. I would recommend that you look there if you were looking for used gear. This is an example of what I have on my QRZ page. I have some pictures in there also. This is an azimuth map. The interesting thing to me, not being a cartographer, was I thought if I went due south, I'd run into South America. And you don't. And I thought if I went due east, I'd run into Europe, and you don't. So if you have an antenna that's directional, or if you have nodes on your antenna, it's good to know how that works. And there's a couple of different websites, and you can get an idea for the bearings. And you would adjust, I suppose, if it was that precise. This is a DX spotter network. This is the Maidenhead Square. That's my house. So I'm DM79MF, not too far from Dave over there. If you're interested in propagation, which we all are, even though we're in kind of a down cycle right now, there are a couple of different places to go. I'll show you a few of them as we go through. This is kind of a bad picture, but you get the idea. This website is listed in the index I just showed you. But it gives you all the information you need to know about weather. It'll also tell you about space weather and about solar flares and solar numbers and the A factors and K factors, all that stuff, and tells you which bands are open. These are two different screens of information that he provides. There's about 15 or 20 different ones. A lot of people that run their own websites will go ahead and put a link in. It'll constantly update with the information. This is DX Maps. It's an interesting way to find out what's open. We had a question on the net the other night where someone wanted to know how we find stations to talk to. And where it's open is part of the question there. And this will tell you, you can click which band you want to see, and you can see what's open. And, when we get in a little bit further, I use Ham Radio Deluxe, and it has a DX cluster spotting feature. And so you can monitor all the different bands and see if there are openings. And so last year in the CQ Worldwide SSB contest, there was an opening on 15, and there were hundreds of contacts were made, and it just happened as a fluke. So. VOCAP is a way where you can see if you have the ability to reach someone on a band. I've never been successful using it, but I thought I'd throw it up there. There's a reverse beacon network. You can read the rules. As I recall, you have to send CQ and your call sign in CW at least twice, and then it'll pick you up. You've had presentations on FT8. This is an example of the FT8. Shows you where you're getting out to. I was running QRP and I was getting all those. Another question came up when we were talking on the net last week, I believe. People wanted to know, how can I tell where people are? Well, one way to do it that's free is to go to this website, websdr.org, and you can actually click through and get a rig on the air, and you can manipulate it and listen to what they are hearing in their location. One of the closest ones is one in Utah. And if you click through, this is 40-meter phone. You can I kind of crunched it up so you could see some of the controls, but you can move up and down. You hit the equals and it'll drop off the decimal point and put it at 00. And then you can go up and you can set the band pass that you're looking at, and you can click through and you can do CW. It's a great way to get on the radio for free.
You can also record yourself
You can.
and have it email you the recording. So if you're having trouble with your audio or want to tailor your audio, or if you've got a CW chirp or whatever, you can hear yourself and have a copy of that in your email.
It's pretty interesting when you think it's free. It's even more amazing. And you can put a real skinny CW filter on there, and you can listen to CW to your heart's content. And so for those of you that are antenna challenged because you live in a homeowners association, this would be a way to at least listen on the air. You can't transmit.
What's that called?
That's WebSDR.
WebSDR.org.
Yep.
And then another way, which some of you may not have, this is an SDR play that I have, and you just connect it to your antenna. You can actually use, in most of the modern rigs, you can use the receive out, and it'll run to your computer, and then it's software based, and you can actually run your rig from this. And so you can click on a signal and listen to it. You can, there's a lot of stuff. You can change the filters, and you can change whether you're listening to CW or upper lower sideband or whatever.
Greg, they just posted on the SDR Play website a true spectrum analyzer software package for the SDR Play, which turns it into, I sold spectrum analyzers, and it just makes me want to cry.
This is absolutely amazing stuff.
Yeah.
This SDR Uno is free software, and the SDR Play, it costs you $100 or $120 for the one channel version, and there's another one that'll allow you to have two inputs, and so you can monitor multiple bands all at once. It's really interesting stuff. So the real reason that I think Bob wanted me to talk was talk about rig control. And I use Ham Radio Deluxe and N1MM. Of course, the WSJTX used for FT8 primarily, although you can use for JT65, JT9, and their new contest mode. JT Alert, I believe, is sort of a competing product. It's not a Joe Taylor product, but it uses the FT8 stuff, as is JS Call. It used to be JT8. And I think Joe Taylor asked him to change the name. And I've never used this JTDXX. So this is the rig control software that comes with the Yaesu FTDX 3000. That's the rig I have. And it's interesting in passing because it's an exact replica of your rig. You can click all the buttons and do all the same stuff. I've turned it on twice. I don't know why you never use it. My rig's here, and so I don't get it. But now I do use Ham Radio Deluxe, and I remember when we did the shack tours, I heard questions because some people had old versions of Ham Radio Deluxe, and a lot of other people never ever used Ham Radio Deluxe. Does anybody use Ham Radio Deluxe?
I just bought it.
Got a few people. So Ham Radio Deluxe will allow you to do just about anything. This is their rig control panel. and it allows you to pick your bands. You can adjust the tuning. You can click that little line above the 5 and it'll go to 6. You can click the one below and it'll go to 4. You can use the wheel on your mouse and scroll through them. The thing I like about it are the push button controls on the top left and top right. Instead of having to dig through the menu system, I can just go ahead and click when I want the digital noise filter on, boom. And then there's a slider down in the bottom right-hand corner, the third one up. And I can slide that thing and adjust the digital noise reduction. And so it'll go all the way from 0 to, I think, 10 or 15. And when every time I turn it on or off, it'll just stay wherever the slider is. It has digital notch filter, all the stuff that you have to spend forever to dig into on a Yaesu radio and presumably on an ICOM too. It's a little bit easier to get to. There's a VFOA and a VFOB. This one's set in CW mode. And of course it's got an S meter and all the stuff that goes along. Another module in Ham Radio Deluxe is their logging software. And there's a lot in the logging, so you need to take a little bit of time and kind of work your way through it. This panel here allows me to plug in a call sign, and then it'll do a QRZ lookup and populate it with the information about the person. So Julio's in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. That's how I can send him an email if I want to send him emails. And then there's information about whether I've worked that DXCC entity, whether I've worked that mode, whether I've worked that band. So, and this tells me so that I'll know in terms of if I'm chasing awards. Now, I'm not chasing any awards, but it also like has an IOTA identifier because he's on an island. This is the DX spotting cluster. You can select hundreds of different clusters. I thought, well, how am I ever going to decide? Well, it turns out that they all submit most of their information to the same clearing service, and so most of the information is the same. There is a huge manual on how to make the DX cluster work. I wouldn't necessarily commend people to read that. It is interesting if you have limitations on your antennas or the kind of equipment you're using, you may want to say, I don't want to see spots from people all over the world. I only want to see spots from people I'm likely to hear. And you can build in filters. And so for a while I had it set up so that I could filter out anything that wasn't spotted in, say, the Rocky Mountain region. I found that to be more work than it was really worth. If you click on the spot and you don't hear anything, I guess you can't hear it. So this is set up so that all I have to do is click, and it automatically tunes my radio to that frequency, to that mode, plugs the guy's call sign in up there so I can log the contact, and you're ready to go. It also has the same thing presented. This is by frequency of how recent the spot was given. And over on the right-hand column, those are a list of the call signs and frequencies that they're located on as a result of the spotting network. That's a little bit better sometimes for me because if you're working on a Saturday, you want to get somebody in a specific location, you can tell by their call sign where that it's someone you want. If you click it, you have the same ability to tune the rig right to where you want to go. It's also smart enough that it will take if the spot includes someone who's working split, it'll automatically put your radio into split so you can work them.
Wow. That'd be a good thing.
And it's really pretty nice. So like when you're doing phone, it's normally 5 up listening. Well, this will automatically split it. It'll automatically get the radio ready to go. And then if you need to change that, of course you can with your receiver or transmit incremental tuning knob. Those of you who've done this. So anyway, I can't say enough about how this is the screen that is up the most in my shack when I'm at my rig. Now, another module in Ham Radio Deluxe is this Digital Master 780. And in the old days, say a year or two ago, we used to do things like the SK31 and Olivia and Hillschreiber and all these other digital modes that Joe Taylor's completely wiped off. But oddly enough, when I was making these slides, I went out and I just checked, and I made 5 or 6 real quick contacts with PSK 31. There are people out there.
And you can actually talk to them.
And you can actually, it's
Instead of
nice
your
because,
computer
because it's
talking to
moving
them.
slow enough that you can type while it's sending, and you can actually have a conversation with someone. Unlike the complexity of doing an FT8 QSO where you just click once and you go have a cup of coffee. So it comes up in a panel like this, which gives you some controls. You can see down here a list of the different kinds of modes that will allow you to work. And within each one of them, there might be 6 or 8 different options. And then it will decode up above. In this case, we're running PSK 31. There's a PSK 31 translation. This is what the person was sending me. If I right-click on that person's call sign, it'll automatically fill the information into that for me, so that when I'm ready to log the contact, it'll happen.
Will it automatically set the mode based on whether it's PSK or?
Well, you have to
the
decide
other-
whether you want to be communicating a PSK 31, and then you pick that, and then you look for the signals. You can click, there's this ×1 and that 1653. You can click and it'll take you to the next recognized signal of that type.
And it tells you what kind of signal it
It
is.
does not.
That's my
And
question.
so you can go YouTube it, because I did that once, thinking, well, how would I know in Olivia if it came up and bit me? I have no idea.
There is something called RSID that you can turn on DM780, and the other station has to have it turned on, and it transmits a code to your DM78 that decodes it and tells you what mode it is, and it'll ask you if you want to jump to that mode and frequency. Look up it's called RSID.
Because it's kind of tough to pick, is it 8-bit, 16-bit, 32?
For the Olivia and the Contestia and those modes, it's hard, but for PSK 31 and 64, is it? Or whatever, you start to really easily
You'll
identify
recognize that
it
signal as
visually.
PSK 31.
Yes, very quickly.
And then
Yeah.
you see, there's an artifact in there where they actually have the RSID up there.
There you go. That's
But
yes.
that is an artifact, I believe. The thing about running this digital mode is it allows you to work with macros. And you can actually carry on a QSO, which is kind of fun in comparison to an FT8 conversation. So they have different tabs. If we go back, you'll see CQ call, reply, info, closing, and various. So I have my macros set up underneath those, and so I can send out a CQ by 2 or a CQ by 3 or whatever. I have a reply, I have a rag chew envelope, so that you're just given the basic information that I can type while it's transmitting, and they can receive and send back. But this is all built into Ham Radio Deluxe, and it runs through my rig with my cat control to my computer. So I don't have a separate box or motor or anything. Now, on top of all that, it also will allow you to control your rotor for those of you that have a tower and a rotatable antenna. I don't, I just know it's there. It also has a satellite mode, and it keeps track of all the Keplerian elements. I know that Jonathan in W0SLO has given at least one presentation on satellites. Well, this keeps track of all the satellites that are up there or that have been up there, and it'll tell you where they are, and you can kind of track. The Keplerian elements are automatically loaded in there. They have a couple of databases they download from. It's a pretty useful tool, although what little I know about the satellite guys is they're all standing out in the front yard with their dual band Yagis trying to handle that and handle this, and I'm sure they aren't looking at their computer. But this is an example of all the different satellites. There's a couple of the real old satellites that are up that are still working. One of them that just came back was one of the first satellites ever sent up, and it was designed to work a certain frequency up and a different band down, and the batteries failed, and as a result of the battery failure, it switched polarity, and so now it's the opposite. going up and going down. And it only works when it's in the sunlight, when it's rotated correctly. But you can work all those, or you get that information here. That's an example of the Keplerian elements, that line 1, line 2. It means nothing to me. For those of you that do contesting, are there any contesters in here? We got one, maybe Bob, yeah, and Joyce. This is from a contest calendar. It just gives you an idea. This was for the North American QSO party, and it tells you what bands you're working and what classes they have and all that kind of stuff. You might find that of value. So this is the setup screen in N1MM, which is not part of Ham Radio Deluxe, but it is free. And I had always heard of N1MM as being a software that you would use for logging. And I didn't get it. It's really contesting software that logs. And once you learn how to use it, it's a very strong, powerful tool. I've only used it in CW, and it's a lifesaver there. When you go in, you set it up, and you'll set up for the specific contest. There'll be a required exchange, and you plug in the info. It'll know from the pull-down menu which contest you're doing, and it'll pre-populate these fields with most of what you need for your exchange. Then when you launch N1MM, it allows rig control also. It's got the same kind of an idea of a band map over here. There's nothing showing on my log because I didn't have one of the logs open, but it would normally show you the stations you work. I've got a slide that'll show you that in a minute or two. And then it's got this window down below. So when you, N1MM, the band map window, it has an incredible amount of information buried in there, and it's really for these contesters. And the thing that I haven't ever used that some people are able to use is you can hit Control Alt up or down, and it'll jump to the next multiplier, because the secret to contesting is working stations and multipliers. And the more of both you get, the better off you are. But you want those multipliers, and so if you're on a search and pounce, you're going to try and go to the multipliers. This allows you to do that easily. Now, this little teeny window, you hit that SHDX button, and it'll send out a request to the DX cluster for more spots. You can set the width of your filter from narrow to wide, which helps in CW, because sometimes you don't know exactly where the people are, and so if you widen it, you'll be able to hear them. You can also, I forget what the CQ does, it doesn't send CQ. There is the RIT, XIT, and then the digits in the middle tell you how much you're offset, so that if you are running on a frequency and someone calls in and they're a little bit off, you can tune so you can hear them better, and then your RIT number would show up there. And so those are all clickable. When you are actually participating in a contest, this is the screen that you spend most of your time with. Now you go back to that band, to the frequency window that was just up, and you'll see that you can click a frequency or you can click a call sign. Now, if you are in some contest, you can't have the call signs provided to you, or you're going to run assisted, and you may not want to run assisted. And these bearings, I assume, are for your rotator on your beam, so that it's going the right direction. In any event, when you click on there, it'll give you what they think the call sign is. And so if it turns out that's the call sign, you can just hit, I think, enter, and it'll automatically enter it into this window. And then if, in this case, the exchange was name and state. And so when that guy sends me back his name, I type it in there. And when he sends back his state, I type it in there. If I want to know if the band's in use, you just hit your function keys on your computer. This is all computer generated. And this will send all the information. It's really fascinating stuff. You probably use it a lot. So when I am searching and pouncing, someone is sending a CQ or a QRZ, I might hit F4, which is send him my call sign. If He sends back my call sign, then I'll send him the exchange by just hitting F2. And all I do is I hit F2 and it sends it all out in CW. And I can set the speed. This one's set at 12 words a minute, but you're not gonna get very far doing 12 words a minute. They really want, you're gonna be up at 30 before you know it. As long as you can recognize the call signs coming back at you in the exchange, that's sort of the challenge. So sometimes you will set it lower if you're still learning. But if I need to send again, I just hit F8, it'll send again. He'll come back at me, what's your number? And I'll give it, and I'll just have to hit it again and give it to him. But it's pretty easy way to go, and it really works well for contesting. And I also have used it for some of the DX, like when I worked Dulce Island, I worked it on CW using this, and it was much easier. Now, there are many ways to do the logging, and I have 3 different ways that I do it, but I keep all of my logs in a master log in Ham Radio Deluxe. So, the cheap way to do it is you can just set up a spreadsheet or take a piece of paper and write it out. We're not required to do it, as I recall, right, Sue? I found this guy, it's the North Carolina something, and they have a spreadsheet all set up so you can plug in all the information, they keep track of your awards and all that kind of stuff, and you end up with a spreadsheet that looks kind of like this, that is all set up for you, and all you have to do is plug it in. I don't subscribe to this way, but for some of you, you may want to go that route. This is EQSL. It's not recognized for awards like Logbook of the World, and so that's one of the drawbacks. It's pretty electronic and relatively easy to use. You log into their website, and then you go to your inbox and you see who sent you requests to confirm QSOs, and then you can confirm or you can decline, depending on whether you think that whether you can confirm the contact. And then you can create a QSL card, and then all this nonsense down below, it plugs in all the information automatically for you based upon the database log. And this is what the database looks like. And so if you have a question, you can click through their call sign. What I normally do is I go into the Logbook of the World, I do an alphabetical sort based on call signs, so it's easy for me to find them, and then I can look across and see whether they are in my logbook correctly. And if they are, then I just hit accept. It'll actually pop up a window and I can send them a QSL card. But the 90-pound gorilla here is Logbook of the World. Is everybody on Logbook of the World? Well, if you aren't, you need to be. If you want to confirm contacts electronically and you don't want to rely on QSL cards. I've actually been to clubs where they spend an entire session showing you how to log in to Logbook of the World. I can tell you that it's harder to get logged into Logbook of the World than it was for me to set up all my electronic investment accounts and to get them. They don't trust anybody. And you go through all this stuff, and then they send you a postcard with the keys to the kingdom on it that you have to type in. So I don't really know why, but you can see that it's been used for over a billion QSO records. It's staggering. Now, that's both sides, so it's really 500 million. And when you log in, this is the kind of information you'll see. Who I work, the date, time, the band, the mode, the frequency, and then QSL instructions. And you can just click, it's interactive hyperlink. So it's pretty good. This is an example of what happens if you click one of those. It'll pop up and it'll tell you what zone they're in. This is for me. And the DXCC was Poland was the guy I was trying to work. Where's his call sign? S04M, sorry. SL4M. And this is sort of the limited interface that you have when you work Logbook of the World through its program. Now, back to Ham Radio Deluxe. So, when I log a contact in Ham Radio Deluxe, it's as simple as you just, all you have to do is click Add, and it'll take all the information out of that call sign lookup and put it into my database, all automatically. And what you'll end up with is a pop-up window that'll show you all this information about the contact, about the call sign. And so this is just the logbook tab for ZS10 or OPB, Robert. So you can look up that person by clicking the lookup tab, and it'll bring in all this information. It'll tell you also about work, whether I've worked the continent, what modes or what bands I've worked it on, and whether I've worked that CQ zone or that IOTA if it is applicable. It's pretty interesting stuff. And then you can go to the next tab over, and you can plug in information about the age of the contact and all that kind of stuff. It's all pretty automated. You click that lookup thing, and it knows where your rig is set, knows the frequency you're on, knows the mode you're in, knows the UTC time. All that stuff comes in automatically. And then down here in the bottom, if you're doing this while you're actually contacting someone, you can just one-click it, and it will automatically send to the spotting network that I work this guy, and so it'll list me in the DX cluster. So it's pretty useful. Now, one of the other features of Ham Radio Deluxe is it allows you to set up so you can print out your QSL cards, the information, and the address labels. So you can send out the QSL cards if you want to. It's kind of a bad image, but you get the idea. You can tell it what information you want to put on the card, and then you can actually barcode them if you want. You can do all this stuff automatically. This is the example of about what the QSL card is, and I run it through a tape printer, and then I just stick it right on my QSL card. And you have different choices of modern, traditional. You can kind of play with the formatting, but it basically looks like this. Now, one of the other things that Ham Radio Deluxe will allow you to do is keep track of contesting, and of awards. And I never knew there were so many different things that they kept track of and that were important people. But you can look at it by band and by mode, and it keeps track of them all, so you know who you got. It also will generate a map of the contacts you have. And so this is mine. I was telling Dave, I think tonight, that I may have an issue with the directionality of my antenna, because I'm getting nothing really in Africa. Now, I know there's not a lot of stations in Africa that are on the air, but I should be able to hit a couple of those guys like Bill down in South Africa, and I'm not getting them. So I'm going to adjust my antenna for a spring project. So I could go back and log in and manually enter all of my contacts into Logbook of the World, or there's a feature in Ham Radio Deluxe where you click one button and it loads all your contacts up, all the information, it's done. And then similarly, you click and one log down. Now, what you'll want to do is go back a few days, because there are people that may have, it may have been a while since you checked, and you can set the date so it'll go back and check to make sure that you've got all the log entries that you need. And when you succeed, it'll bring up all the information. You then save it to your database, but it'll tell you how many contacts you have. So I had 912 entries. And when I downloaded it, matched 11 entries that time. Now, in1MM, its log looks like this. This is based on per contest. So the contest rules tell you what the multipliers are. In this one, there was a zone multiplier and a country multiplier. And so you could get both of them. And so this keeps track of them visually in the screen while you're actually doing your contest. So DX, we talked about the DX clusters. These are some useful links. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on them, but it is interesting. This spider manual is probably worthwhile reading if you're gonna use a DX cluster, so you know what you can and can't, how you can use it and get the most out of it. There's this DX world, and it allows you to, they have like a publication. You can find out where the DX people are gonna be and when they're gonna be there, and you can try and pick them off if that's what you're into. We talked earlier about the contest calendar. And so this is a contest calendar as of January 10th to the 17th. If you click on, these are all hyperlinked down below, and I think I showed you an image of what one of those contests would look like. If you clicked it, it'd tell you. It's kind of hard for me to follow because I guess I need to be smarter, but it's UTC time, and so frequently when you're on a Friday contest, you're on Friday, but their Saturday contest starts at 00 Zulu. So now, for I assume there'd be some technicians only in the class. It doesn't look like there are too many. For VHF, UHF, use RT Systems, and then for DMR, use OpenSpot. And we laughed when Joyce's ham station was her FT60, just that one radio. And you can get on the air with that one radio, and you can manually program it, and you can talk to people on those channels however you want to set them up. But it's a heck of a lot faster to download the club's list and then import it right into your radio. So I would strongly recommend that if anybody's going to do the VHF, UHF thing. And then the OpenSpot, of course, is a way to have, to be able to use your DMR radio to get onto the internet, to talk to people in talk groups and literally all over the world without tying up a repeater. And so my last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is CW. And there's a list of resources here that are pretty good. Is anybody in here besides Dan want to learn CW? We got a few. Okay. Well, the place where I learned the most was LCW Online. Learn CW Online. It will send you 5 character groups, and you can practice at any speed you want to. And you can pick the characters that you're having a hard time with. It'll start you off with a couple of characters and build you up through the 40 characters you need to know. It's really quite useful. Now, Morse Code Trainer is a different approach where they focus more on trying to teach you words instead of characters. And when I took CW Academy the first time, level 1, I think I spent too much time trying to decompose the words into the characters so I could recompose them into the words instead of learning what a word sounds like. And the Morse Code Trainer is on their website. There may be some use restrictions, but I think they want to encourage anybody that wants to learn CW to learn it. Roofs XP is a call sign generator, and it will send you call signs. And they'll send them any speed you want, and they'll send you 50 of them. You can keep track of how good you are. And you can get one repeat by hitting like F6. And if you get the call sign, if you hit, it keeps track of you, it gives you points. And if you can get the call sign the first time through without a repeat, it's worth something. And if it takes you longer, it goes down as time goes by. And if you ask for a repeat, it gets cut in half from wherever you were, automatically cut in half. So it's a challenging thing and a good way to practice call signs. Morris Runner is kind of a twist on the theme. It was written by someone that's probably an evil genius. It's more like contesting. They will send you call signs, and then you need to respond to them, kind of like what I was describing you would do with N1MM, where it's all automated. This, you're just using your keyboard, and you can ask for repeats, you can, if you didn't get it, you can hit the question mark, and it'll send the CW for a question mark. But the guy on the other side may decide you're too much work, and he'll just not respond to you. So then you're trying to work somebody that doesn't care. And so you need to send out a CQ and get back in the race. And then it'll add noise, and it'll add interfering stations, and it'll have multiple calls. And so all this is going on, and it's timed, and you're trying to get points. And it can be kind of a challenge. And it's very infuriating, because you get really close, and then the guy just disappears. And and you just wasted all that time trying to land it. But it's much like working a real contest would be.
And you can modify that so that it'll send you single calls with
Right.
QRM, QRN, or whatever.
Right.
It's a nice program.
It is, and it really is interesting, because the guy has like an attitude, and if you send the question mark too many times, man, it's gonna move somebody that's fun.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to answer questions. Now, the CWA, which is CW Ops, runs an academy, the CW Academy. They have 3 levels, and it's free. So anybody that really wants to learn, that's a way to learn. Eric and I have both done it. Anybody else in CW Academy? I was a little frustrated with it. I think Eric liked it.
They're kind of persnickety,
Yeah.
and they're demanding. So you gotta, when you sign up for it, you're gonna wait 3 to 6 months to get into the class, and then you're gonna meet 1 or twice a week until the class is done. And
Right, and
there's homework associated.
it's really a self-taught thing.
It is.
So they have homework assignments, and they want you to practice an hour a day, and then twice a week, you'll have a 1-hour bitch session with an advisor. The advisor, in CW Academy Level 2, my advisor never sent a single character in code. Never once.
He was.
But he was there trying to help us with our problems, trying to help us do workarounds, trying to help us figure out how to get our keys set so that we could send better. Whatever it took, he was there to help us. But he was an advisor instead of an instructor. In any event, they have just redone their files for Level 2. And it's an incredible resource, because those of us that have been trying to learn this have been stuck kind of using the ARRL W1AW files, where they type text out of QST magazines. And that's tough sledding. But the CWA practice files, there are 2 things. One is short stories, and the short stories are repetitive, and so you learn a lot of the words that have some similarities. So it's worthwhile going there, because you can go to the short stories and they send the same story at 10 and at 13 and 15 and 18 and 20 and 25. And so you can practice head copying if you want to do that. They also have complete tapes of QSOs, also at 10 and at 13 and 15. And so you can listen to QSOs and hear what an actual QSO sounds like. A lot of work went into that. This AA9PW, he's got a website full of information. Morris Camp is it's a good practice for listening to words. It's just a website. They'll shoot a word at you at anywhere, You'd be surprised. You can listen at about 30 words a minute to short stuff, and you can set the length of the words. So if you set it at 3 characters, they can shoot it at you a couple of times and you'll get it. So it's worthwhile to do that as practice also. Now, CW Get, once again, is another free program, and I would recommend it to people that are practicing CW, because it's a decoder. But I don't use it to decode what they're sending me. What I do is I use it to decode what I'm sending. And oddly, everybody that's learning CW thinks that they're great senders. And then all you have to do is look at how it translates, and you go, oh my goodness, no wonder nobody can copy me. It's very, very difficult to send a word as a word, and to have the right gap between the characters and not too much. And this will show you, and you can see how well you're sending. It's great practice. Quote of the day we talked about. And then this CW Dime Bank is a place that you can go to and you can listen to CNN, W1AW, or NN9 use practice tables. And they send them and you can select different speeds. And so if you're just sitting in your shack, you can listen to CNN headlines. And at, you know, like the low end is 7, 10, 13, 15. And the high end, I think they go all the way to 40. So, and that's it.
Greg, if you'll email me the presentation, I'll get it on the site.
Perfect. Then
Some
you-
super links up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially all those links are great.
Yes, sir.
So, on the rig control stuff, most of these things are all based on Windows. And Windows 7 has, in a year, all of the updates, free updates for Windows 7 are going away. And I sort of decided I'm just not gonna do Windows 10, so is there a move to put these things on Apple or the Raspberry Pi or Linux or?
Well, I was gonna say that the, I guess, main competitor to HRD is FLDigi. Yeah, that's a cross-platform digital decoder that I know of off the top of my head. There's a lot of programs out for Raspberry Pi too.
Well, there is an entire suite of ham-related software that is Linux-based. I don't know the name of it. Who's the Linux guy there?
It's not that good.
It's not that good.
There's not enough variation there in the available programs. It's really not that good.
And I'm using Windows 10, so I don't have that problem yet. I'm sure when they move to Windows, whatever they're going to
But for instance, in Linux, you've got, as the gentleman here said, you've got, what's that called, FLDigi, you have JS8 call, you have WSJT, my unfavorite program, and a few other things. So some of it's there. There's some logging programs, but nothing like there is for Windows.
When's it gonna change?
Maybe after 7 goes away.
What's that?
Well, it is, and and Ham Radio Deluxe is sort of like a Windows suite. It's more than anybody would ever use. And it's like that. What's that joke about? How many Microsoft engineers does it take to screw in a light bulb? 2, 1 to find the water faucet. It's kind of like that. It's there, but you may not be able to figure out how to do it.
I'd be interested to know just how many people are trying to do Linux, because I'm one of them.
I'm a Linux guy.
I grew up there, so I don't try.
For 30 years.
Good to know.
Raspberry Pi is a really neat platform, but you find out just exactly how good its performance really is when you try to do things like SDR on it. It works fine as long as you keep the bandwidths really narrow.
Doesn't HRD cost